Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peter Boom Boom Reviews Stuff. And I am back for another television show review. And today I'm going to be reviewing the third season of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. So, before I get into this review, I have to give you guys a little bit of a preface about this television show. I grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries. I loved Unsolved Mysteries. I was obsessed with it. If it would come on the TV and I was in the house, that music would terrify me when I was growing up, and I loved watching it. So, several years ago, when Netflix picked it up and they started doing this, Netflix original Unsolved Mysteries, I was very, very excited about it because I had really missed Unsolved Mysteries, and in fact, love to go back and watch like the updates. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, they're called Unsolved Mysteries because they're not solved, and then like months later or years later, they come out sometimes and they do updates when there's follow through. And I was actually thinking about this last night, because, and I was talking about this on my vlog, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to save this for my review. And I haven't gone in and really planned anything that I'm going to talk about, so I'm just going to go through and talk about the different episodes, and I'm just going to respond and kind of react to them. The thing about these Unsolved Mysteries compared to the ones that I grew up watching, is that when I was growing up watching Unsolved Mysteries, there seemed to be kind of like three categories of Unsolved Mysteries. There was what would be called kind of like the spooky paranormal. And that was like UFOs, ghosts, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, things like that, right? So there was that category. And there was always like, I think there was three parts to each episode, and each one was like 20 minutes. And so that would be like one. There was always like one paranormal one in there, right? And then there was typically always like the section that was like some unsolved homicide, or kind of like mystery of somebody that had died in some kind of unknown way or unknown fashion. And then there was typically the missing person. And also within the missing person spectrum, it wasn't just people that had like gone missing, which many of those back in the day, I was thinking about this last night, was that they would just like walk away from their homes, or you would see them like, and I was kind of like, my friend Tanya and I used to joke about this back in the day. It'd be like, Tanya and her friend Peter were last seen entering the Walmart at 2 a.m. And that was kind of how Unsolved Mysteries was, right? And then you would like flash forward 20 years and nothing had been heard from these people, right? Another one of the big shows on Unsolved Mysteries back in the day, and I don't know why I remember this, was people that had been separated at birth or had been adopted, and then they would want to find like biological siblings or biological parents, and they would be reconnected. And I always remember those being kind of like big updates that they would show on the show. So when I started watching this several years ago, I was very, very excited, but I have to say that first season, I was kind of a little bit let down. Like, I felt like maybe 2 or 3 of the episodes were what I knew Unsolved Mysteries to be when I was growing up, but the rest of them I felt like kind of didn't really fall into that, and I felt like Unsolved Mysteries was trying to be something that it wasn't. I felt the stories were important. I felt the stories were paying homage to the victims and talking about the cases that were important to talk about. But I felt like they were very, very serious in regards to what was going on as far as... Unsolved Mysteries was always kind of like, even though the stories were very serious, I don't want to minimize the stories that happened in the 80s or the early 90s with Unsolved Mysteries. What I'm saying was, it wasn't a 2-hour documentary that you would sit down and watch, right? Whereas I felt in the first season of Unsolved Mysteries that it was like these very, very serious cases that were ongoing, these open cases, right? And it was either that, or it was cases that like, I don't know, like I felt like it was almost kind of trying to be a true crime documentary when that was never really what Unsolved Mysteries was trying to be to begin with, if that makes sense, okay? So that was my only criticism for it, was that I felt like it was a lot deeper than it was. And I don't even really remember what those episodes were or what I watched back then or whatever. I remember, I think this might have been from season 2, but I remember, I don't know why this is the one that stuck out to me, But I think it stuck out to me because it so did not fit to me in the whole Unsolved Mysteries realm. And I think they tried to make it more international since it was on Netflix. But it was the one about the woman that was like maybe a spy or something. And they found her like dead in her hotel room. Like I can remember watching that and I felt like this would never have been on Unsolved Mysteries back in the day. Like it just wouldn't have, right? And so... do you guys remember that episode? So anyway, that's just how I feel about it. Don't come for me. I'm just telling you my opinion. So when I started this season of Unsolved Mysteries, I was so excited because I'm excited every time a new season of Unsolved Mysteries comes out because I love Unsolved Mysteries. But I didn't have super high expectations because of the last 2 seasons. I've watched them. I've enjoyed watching them. And then I'm kind of like, I would say if there's 10 episodes, 4 of them I like, and the other 6, I'm just kind of like, I am not super intrigued by the story. Okay, so I go into this season, and I have to tell you, my overall evaluation of the season is that this is the closest season to what I remember Unsolved Mysteries being like when I was a kid. I was just kind of blown away with the season. I thought it was very, very well done. I thought that it was very cohesive. I feel like they're kind of maybe like, I don't know, getting their groove as they like are into season 3 now. So I kind of want to go in here, and I don't really want to talk a lot about each of these specific cases because I don't like want to speculate and all of that kind of stuff. I will say this, that, you know, there's always been a fear factor with Unsolved Mysteries when you're watching it. And I will say that that is one thing that they have retained, is that there is still very much a fear factor. And there was actually several of these that I thought were very scary to watch. The first one was called Mystery at Mile Marker 45. Tiffany Valente, a promising young athlete, is struck by a train 4 miles from home. But was her death a suicide or something more sinister? And this story is just so tragic and so sad. And if you watched it, it is about this girl, and she's at this birthday party, getting ready to go to, like, down the street, and with friends and family, and she's getting ready to go to college that fall, and she's broken up with somebody that she was in a relationship with, and she ends up, like, the one thing about it for me was that there's this part at the beginning where they talk about how, like, a friend of hers accuses her of using her bank card or something. And then there's really no follow-up to that storyline and the whole thing. And I'm like, that's kind of a big part of like what happened, because there's something that sets her off and she like walks down the road and then these people supposedly pick her up or whatever. But anyway, when they are but you don't find that out till later. When you're watching this whole thing go down, she supposedly walks all this way to these train tracks and then like throws herself on the train tracks, right? And they're showing how that's not possible, and that at one point she loses her shoes. Her mom finds her shoes, which I just think is so horrific. And there's no way that she could have walked on these like gravel roads through the brush and all of this woods to this point of where she like throws herself on the train tracks, and there's like no marks on her feet whatsoever. So basically what they're saying is that she was driven out there. It's so, and I think the one consistent thing with a lot of these unsolved mysteries is that the police force never really wants to get that involved, which is so tragic and so sad, and they're just like, oh, they want to write it off. And that was very true in this case. So that was the first one that I watched. I kind of left it not really knowing what to think. It very much seems like a homicide to me, in all honesty. There just seemed to be so many things to me that it was like, okay, there are just so many... There were so many unanswered questions, and for me, watching so much true crime, when there are so many unanswered questions, that just doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. It just doesn't. But it's, anyway, a horribly tragic story. The next one that I watched was called Something in the Sky. Over 300 residents of Western Michigan report seeing unearthly lights over the night of March 8th, 1994. Decades later, the event remains unexplained. So, I've shared this in tons of videos, but I 100% believe in UFOs, extraterrestrials, and aliens. I really, really do. We can have a long conversation about this, but I believe that they are here on Earth. I believe that people know about it. I am a UFO. Listen, I firmly believe in all of this, right? So this one was very interesting to me because back in the day when you would watch Unsolved Mysteries, it would be like a bleep in the sky and then they would do like a 20-minute episode about that. But this wasn't that. Like, this was about how like 300 people had reported it. It was so funny. I was telling my friend Tanya about this because this one part is this woman and she's like, well, I was talking on the phone to my friend Edna and my husband was in the basement. And when Edna and I were talking on the phone, now you know when I would talk to my friend Edna, I always like to pace in the kitchen. She was like, I just sat there and watched the light for a half an hour while I was talking to Edna on the phone. I said, Edna, I just can't believe this light. And not once does she ever call her husband up to see this light. I was like, Tanya, you know, I'd be like, Alex, get up here. Oh my God, there's a light down there. But anyway, so all these calls start happening to like the police department. The police department calls the meteorologist guy and he does this radar check and he can see it. So there's like verified stuff that this is verified stuff. That sounds so official, doesn't it? There's like scientific evidence that this actually occurred that night. Like he sees it on the radar, right? And years later they make him like, or they make him retract his statement because it makes the meteorology department or whatever look foolish. And like he basically has to move and all this kind of stuff because of his reputation. People are making fun of him and all these kinds of things. And you know, it's interesting in 2022, it's like the one answer question. And I love when people say this. It's like, you know, it's like we still don't know anything about it. Do we? I mean, I feel like there are people out there that do, but I was very intrigued by this one. I have to tell you, this one kind of scared me a little bit. So I really liked that one. Then the next one is Body in Bags. A beloved father is brutally mutilated, but his presumed killer, a woman he knew from high school, escapes without a trace. And this story was just so tragic and sad. And it was about a man that was found kind of like, I think by farmers, like out in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road. And that his family is like looking for him, and his son in this story just was so sad with him talking about missing his dad all these years. And this woman, like, who she was like, she's still missing to this day, and they like were able to follow her like by cameras, like right up to this hotel that she was staying in New York City. She left and was on the run, so you know she had something to do with it. You know she did it, right? And so they follow her right up to this hotel, and then she just like vanishes without a trace, and nobody knows where she is. And to this day, nobody knows where she is. I think they said something about she was on like the most wanted list or something like that. It's so horrible what happened to him, and that whole story was very tragic and very sad. And his dad talking too. His dad talked a lot about, like, at the funeral. They had the funeral at the high school, and he had like his own company where he like made shirts and stuff like that. He just was a really nice guy and good father. And it was just so sad to just like hear this whole story and like how this family had been just destroyed over what had happened, and this woman just hit town. And yeah, so anyway, the next one is Death in a Vegas Motel. Buffalo gym barriers, larger-than-life presence in Las Vegas rankled the mob. Could that explain his untimely death under suspicious circumstances? So this was really interesting to me, this case. I didn't know anything about this, and I go to Vegas a lot. I love Las Vegas. This guy, his name was a Jim Barrier, and he owned like an auto shop, and then he also had this wrestling organization that he owned, and he had all these daughters, right? And so he like had real long hair, wore like a hat, like a big leather hat, and he had like a bulletproof vest that he wore that was made out of bullets, and just like a larger than life like kind of character that you would see in Las Vegas, right? Well, right next door to him was this gentleman's club, and I can't remember what the gentleman's club was called. I've heard of it before though, but anyway, it's since like gone under. But there was a lot of supposed mob activity, and he was reporting to the police department on this mob activity. And so they supposedly what happened was, well, they found him in this hotel room, and he supposedly had died of an overdose of cocaine, but he hadn't used drugs or drank like in years and years and years and years. And so they believe that they made him look like that. And this woman, who they even had video footage of, she had like been like, they had like her on the phone, like tracking on the phone. They, I don't know why I'm explaining this to y'all. You probably watched the same show I did. But anyway, I should have just come on here and told you guys what I thought about these is what. I think it was totally a setup by the mob. I do. And when they said that they left a dollar bill and the dollar bill was, I shouldn't be saying these things on camera, should I? Oh my God. Don't come for me. I didn't even know him. I didn't even know the man. Don't come for me. But anyway, they said it's something like it's a sign when you leave a dollar bill or something like that. I didn't know that, but they left a dollar bill and that was it. But apparently this woman that was like a dancer and also / escort that had worked at this gentleman's club next door. Oh, they wanted to like buy his auto shop so that they could like tear it down and make like their club bigger, and he wouldn't sell to them. And so there was all this stuff. The weirdest thing about this case was when his daughters came out to identify his body at the hotel, they couldn't find, he had this white what do you call it, Rolls Royce, and they couldn't find it anywhere in the parking lot. The hotel was literally like 2 buildings, okay? And they drove around this place like several times looking for his Rolls Royce, and they could never find it. And then like hours later the car turned up and the police called them. The police were like, they were like, well, it wasn't there earlier. And the police were like, well, maybe you just missed it. And they're like, we didn't miss the car, like it wasn't there earlier, right? And so it makes you wonder, did somebody clean this car completely out and that they actually killed him in the car and whatever, which is really tragic and sad. The next one was called Paranormal Rangers. Bigfoot, orbs, UFOs, poltergeists, and skinwalkers. For these Navajo Nation Rangers, paranormal activity is just part of the job. This one was really good, and I have to say they showed a lot of footage of the Navajo Reservation in like Arizona and places like that. It is absolutely gorgeous out there. I had never seen any of it. And this one ranger, he said that there were actually parts that he would stand that nobody had ever stood on before in the in the reservation, and I thought that that was so cool. And it was just absolutely gorgeous out there. But their job, these 2 guys, were to follow up on all these reports of like Bigfoots and skinwalkers and UFOs and things like that. It was kind of scary. The one part for me that was the scariest was there was this office building that was supposedly haunted, and at one point had been a morgue. I keep on saying mob. Don't come for me, mobsters, don't, okay? This one point had been a morgue, and so they're like walking in all these rooms, and quarters are falling, like change and quarters are falling behind them. And I'm like, oh, whoo! I was like watching it outside. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, I'd have been out of that building so quick your head would have spun. But anyway, that one was interesting. That one was good. I love the paranormal stuff. The next one is, oh my God, I still have so many more. What happened to Josh? 20-year-old Josh Gumand leaves a college party without a word and is never seen again. 2 decades later, his loved ones just want answers. This one was so sad, you guys. This one was about this kid. He was 20 and he went to this university, small, all men's university in Minnesota, I believe. His girlfriend went to an all women's university, and it was like on the same campus, kind of. And he like left this party at like midnight and was never seen of again, and has never been seen of before. You know, in talking to people that watch this documentary, there was at the end, you found out he really wanted to be like president or senator and all this kind of stuff, right? And his friends kept on saying, like, I know he probably had secrets. Everybody has secrets. Well, they found on his computer drive that he was like talking to people, and like he was either like talking to other guys sexually, or he was like acting like he was a woman talking to guys. And so people, like the police, were speculating that maybe something happened, or he met up with somebody and something happened, or whatever. And then there was even like a serial killer in that area at that time. And then there were like a lot of my friends were like, well, I think the best friend did it. And I was like, well, why do you think the best friend did it? Because the best friend at the time, who was his roommate, like he and his girlfriend had broken up, and his best friend was interested in the girlfriend. I don't know, like I didn't really get that from watching it. I really just felt like it was a bad situation, like a situation that had gone bad, if that makes sense. And like they didn't know what to do, and like they dumped the body somewhere. Like it just really felt, I don't know, it just was a really sad story to me. The mom was the hardest thing for me. I will tell you the one thing though about this though was, he was doing an investigation of the priests that were on this campus, because there was alleged abuse that the priests were doing, and so he was like doing this investigation of these monks, and that was right around the same time. And this is the thing about Unsolved Mysteries, is it's so short. They don't really get into like, this would have been one that would have been a better like 3-part docuseries, because there was so much in there that they get in there and they don't find anything. They go with like dog searches and stuff like that. And I've watched enough of these documentaries where they bring in dogs, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. But I just felt like in watching it, I don't know, my gut, my intuition, call it my sixth sense, told me there was something more to do with these monks and these priests and his investigation. Because he said he wanted to like expose this whole situation of what was going on, and that was in the news at the time too, like that they were being like, you know, investigated and whatever, and I kind of thought it was interesting that they brought that up and that they just kind of let it go. So that was that. And then body in the bay. Patrick Mullen's unmanned boat is found miles from his home. When his body surfaces a week later, authorities are left with more questions than answers. This one was so tragic and sad to me. And it was about this guy, and he was a dad. And it took place in, oh, why can't I think of the name? It starts with a B. But it's basically kind of like by Sarasota. And he like took his boat out, and then his wife like was like, where is he? And then they ended up finding his boat, and he wasn't in it. And then like, I think it was like 8 or 9 days later, they found his body. This charter captain found his body, and it was like all tied up and roped. What was interesting to me about this case was when they had the forensic psychologist come out, and she tried to reenact. So the police said that it was a suicide, and so they tried to reenact what would happen if it was a suicide, and it was almost impossible that it could have been. And there just was so much evidence that this friend of his, like, this is what Unsolved Mysteries does, is that 30 minutes is spent telling you the story, and then the last 10 minutes is telling you, like, the best part of the story, so you're really intrigued, and then it's over, right? Well, he had this friend that, like, started going crazy, like, every anniversary of his death, and then, like, he died himself, and he had a boat, like, so his boat had this red paint on it, and then this guy's boat had these red stripes on it that, like, would have matched it, and his son was like, I think that this guy had something to do with my dad's death. It was so obvious he had something to do with his dad's death. Well, the guy's dead now, and they'll never know, and the police never investigated it further, and that's the sad thing about this, right? Is like, that you get on it, you have to find out what's going on right away, and so we'll never really know anything about it. One thing I did like about this case, though, was when the guy died, his daughter allowed the police to take a paint sample because he had not previously allowed them to take a paint sample. And then when they took a paint sample, they said, well, it could have been any paint because there were so many boats that were painted with that paint that year. It's so similar in paint, or the paint's so similar or whatever. So anyway, that was kind of sad to me. Well, that was sad to me. That whole case was sad to me, and they still don't know anything. And then the ghost in apartment 14. A woman and her young daughter experienced hauntings in their new apartment, linking them to the grisly murder of Marla Spanicki in 1976. This was the best episode of the whole series to me. I was so down with this whole thing. I would love to see a whole series about this case. It was about this woman and her daughter that moved into this apartment 14 in Chico, California, which is really a pretty city. I didn't know that, and I don't know anything about Chico. And except for, I think, like, that was one of the cities of the East area rapists that I read about in Golden State Killer. But anyway, so she moves in this apartment and all this paranormal stuff starts happening. This Elmo doll going crazy in the closet was what freaked me out, okay? And, like, the TV turns on, and then the daughter's talking to this woman that she calls My Liz, when this woman they find out. I mean, there were so many things, you guys. This girl that was missing, in 1976, so they move in like 2002. So the daughter is standing in the hallway one day, and the mom goes, who are you talking to? And she goes, My Liz, this woman that's standing in her room that she sees clear as day, right? This ghost, My Liz, who, when the nickname that this woman went by was Marliz. And then this woman starts having these dreams of this girl in this basement with this box over her head and how she was taken. I mean, you guys, it was like psychic, unbelievable stuff, right? And then she has these dreams of these numbers, and she gives them to the police. Years later, they investigate it, and they find out that because the wife of the husband that supposedly took her, they never solve the case. They never find the body. They can't, like, prosecute him for homicide or anything like that because they never find the body. But the wife comes out with a statement, and she tells all this kind of stuff. So the house where it all occurred, the exact distance between the house and where they think she's buried, like, is almost the exact to the number of the number that this woman that has a dream, she has a dream about this number, this 36.75 or something like that. And it's like almost the exact same number. I mean, she's so psychic. I wanted her to like read my tarot cards. But that one was like the most interesting one to me. It was really sad though. At the very end, it had this Marliz's sister who is like interviewed through most of it. And she says in there, you know, she's like, because this one part, they go in and there's another girl that he kidnaps. And he kidnaps her and keeps her for 7 years. And I'm like, you know, we have all of these books and we hear about all of these, you know, people that, I mean, there's been like 4 or 5, you know, that have been, you know, kidnapped and kept for 5, 10, 20 years at this point. We've read a couple of those books in our True Crime Book Club. And I'm like, if you want to be part of the True Crime Book Club, it's listed below. Anyway, the link on Facebook. And I'm like, you know, this is interesting to me that I've never heard of a case where this woman was kept for 7 years under a waterbed and sexually tortured for 7 years, right? And that's what he ends up going to prison for. So this woman at the end, the sister, she's like, I'm glad that he got, you know, prosecuted for this, but my sister was never basically vindicated for being kept and being killed. It's just, it's really sad. And then the last one is called, hold on a second, Abducted by a Parent. When a child is kidnapped by their own parent, what recourses does the family have? These 2 cases explore the unique pain of parental abduction. And really, it's mostly just one case. The second case is about this father, and he's a doctor, and he and his wife were married, and then they get divorced, and she moves back to Georgia, the state, Georgia, and then she gets remarried, and he doesn't even know she's remarried, and then all of a sudden, they move out of state and take his son. It's very tragically sad. I mean, the saddest part for me was that he was keeping, like, his son's room exactly the way that it looked the last time that he had been there. The other case is, like, a lot longer, and it's about this woman, and she was married to this guy that was from Cairo, and then they get separated, and then they get divorced, and, he says he's taking the kids to Toronto for the weekend, and he ends up taking the kids. I mean, this is basically like Not Without My Daughter, like that movie back in the day with Sally Field. He ends up taking the kids to like all of these remote areas, like in the Middle East, that are very, very scary and like war like ridden areas. And the thing that is so incredibly like so sad to me about this is that there's no recourse whatsoever. Like, apparently in these countries, like, he has just as many rights as she does. And he writes her an email at one point, and he says, the kids are okay, we're living on a farm, and when they're at the age where they can decide if they want to see you or not, basically, they can decide where they want to live. And she's like, but between now and then, he's going to reinforce this idea that I'm this horrible parent, and, you know, like, he's going to basically brainwash them into never wanting to see me again. It was so sad. And at the point that the show is over, I was trying to do the math in my head. The daughter would have been 18, I think, at that point, because it had happened so long ago that the daughter would have been 18 and could have made the decision to see her mother or talk to her mother. It just was so sad. And, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, like, and this is somebody's reality, that she's like an anesthesiologist, and so she's at work, and they're supposed to be back, and she's calling, and they're not back, and she's calling, and they're not back, and she's going out and taking breaks from work. You know, and then they show this scene of her, like she's having these dreams. She says, like, I like to dream of my kids because it's the only time that I get to be with them. And I thought, can you imagine, like, honestly being a parent and having 2 kids and how busy your life is and how full your life is and how much you wanted these children and how you plan for all of that, and then one day, boom, they're just gone, you know? But you know they're somewhere out there. You just can't do anything. And she's working with the FBI and all this kind of stuff. It was so tragic and sad. So, like I said, I thought this season of Unsolved Mysteries was good. I was kind of hoping that I was thinking that maybe they would come out and do like an updated season. There's now 30 episodes that they have. I think 30 episodes. How many, let's see. How many season 2 had? Let's see. Season 2 only had like 6 episodes. And season 1 only had, I think, 6 episodes. Oh no, it had like 9 episodes. So we now have like 20 plus stories. I wish they would come out and maybe do like an update and see if they followed up on any of these stories and what they have found out since then. So anyway, let me know what you think about all of that in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.